Emily Parker, Harry Burns and Oscar Jeffreys. We left the hustle and bustle of London, the queuing traffic, the busy streets and the angry taxi drivers far behind us as we travelled further and further out of the capital. Large grey industrial buildings that bordered the motorway would be replaced by even larger green open areas. We would eventually pull off of the motorway and before long found ourselves travelling down country lanes bordered by thick hedgerows. Farm animals could be seen grazing on lush green grass. The air smelt fresh and everything seemed to move at a much slower pace. I guess having only ever lived in London, without realising it I'd become accustomed to the constant need to rush. The impatient shoppers and the busy subways. There would be none of that here. Nobody seemed any kind of a hurry to pass the day. About an hour and a half after leaving our apartment in London, we finally arrived at our new house, number 2 Frogs Bottom Lane, Brimpton, Berkshire. It was a beautiful stone-built cottage with a thatched roof, the type you might see on a Christmas card covered in snow. It had thick, safe, natural stone walls, heavy oak doors and oak lintels over small mullioned windows. There were 5 bedrooms, each with long corridors leading to each room, a bit like a rabbit warren. My new room was just as big as the room that I'd shared with Robbie in London, but now, with just me in it, felt huge. The floorboards creaked underfoot, and the windows allowed small draughts of cold air to find their way into the room. My room was at the front of the house, and as such caught the morning sun. You could tell that the previous owner had clearly been a keen gardener. However, 2 years that the house had stood empty had left the garden looking wild and overgrown, like an old meadow. In London, our apartment had shared a courtyard to the rear, whereas here the garden seemed to never end. It extended some 200 foot before ending at a rickety old picket fence and gate. The garden also contained a variety of trees, shrubs, hedging plants and old brick-built outbuildings. A path meandered through the garden, made from reclaimed bricks set into the soil. Excuse me. Further up the garden there was evidence of what once had been a vegetable plot, although the weeds had mostly laid claim to the area now. At the far end of the garden was a large shed made from corrugated iron, and although it looked old and unloved, it was curiously solid. The door was closed and locked, and the window to the front was dirty and mostly obscured by cobwebs. However, as I gazed inside, and I let my eyes adjust to the darkness, I could just about see that it contained what must be a large piece of machinery. It had been covered by a heavy green tarpaulin. I was frustrated that despite my best efforts I couldn't force the door open and explore the wonders that must lie beneath. In the days that followed I would make it my mission to find the key that opened that door. Where our garden ended, a small picket fence and gate separated our land from a wood area known locally as Berkeley Woods. Bordering the woods were fields belonging to a farmer, who I had come to know as Ted Hawkins. To the front of the property was a smaller lawned garden, shielded from the road by mature hedging. Due to its lack of maintenance, the hedge had encroached into the lane, growing wildly in all directions. Dad had commented that it didn't give the cottage the best curb appeal in its present state, and that it would be his first job to manicure it. I think secretly he had grand ideas about sculpting elaborate shapes into the hedge, although I would be impressed if he even managed to achieve a straight line. Despite being smaller, the front garden was still more than twice the size of the courtyard that we had shared in London. There was a concrete driveway to the side of the lawn, which led from the side of the house down to Frogs Bottom Lane. As the lane only served to access a handful of properties and Hawkins' farm, on some days it was possible to go all day without seeing or hearing a single vehicle. It even seemed as though aeroplanes avoided flying overhead. In essence, it was a stark contrast to what we had been accustomed to in London. Despite being surrounded by open fields, my sister and I initially felt curiously caged in the sheer remoteness of our new habitat. The quiet was almost too quiet. I found that I couldn't sleep at night without my radio on quietly in the background. At night, a variety of wild animals could be heard howling or hooting in the distance, and occasionally I could detect scurrying in the ceiling above my bed. In the morning I would be woken by a chorus of birds that would perch on my chimney pot. The chimney pot served to amplify the birdsong through my fireplace, a bit like when you place your mobile phone into an empty glass to play music. From the back garden you could look in all directions without seeing a single man-made structure. You couldn't help but fall in love with the beauty of this natural wilderness. I would initially miss the excitement of London, however come to find solace in this newfound freedom. Life had suddenly taken a much slower pace. That is the end of chapter 1. I will read chapter 2 at some point, because the first chapter is more of an explaining chapter, an introduction to the characters. In chapter 2 the story really starts to pick up. I hope you've enjoyed my reading. I look forward to producing the next video. Thank you.